Is Jared online?
Did you get me out of it?
Okay.
We can talk about that.
Teddy got. Thanks.
Okay,
Maybe.
are we good? We
I'll
live?
tell you, Teddy, I'm not feeling well.
We're up.
We're up?
I hope that you guys hostile in
Okay,
this.
yeah, Teddy should
But
be
we'll
here. He
hostile.
came in last night. Welcome to our work meeting for February 22nd. We'll get started right away. Review of the evening agenda. Any changes, notes?
Did we pull that 2.4 on
We'll have some discussion about it, and then you can decide. So we left it on there for some discussion.
Trent's still available to come tonight.
Trent's coming on, that's awesome. Okay. 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 Item 1.2, future agenda items. Okay. 1.3, council discussion of future citizen recognitions.
This may not fall in this particular area, but we did lose J. Bryant Miller this week, so we
Saw
might
your
want
posting.
to do a formal recognition or a memorial or some sort of thing.
That would be
I
good.
actually think that's
The one
really
I blew.
appropriate.
He'll be, his funeral is Monday over at the cemetery. They're gonna use the wagon that used to be his to transport him from the services to church.
Oh, man. That is cool.
Yeah, we'd love to do something.
Okay.
Okay. Then we'll keep moving on down to 2.1, city council roundtable with County Councilmember Sheldon Stewart. Sheldon, we appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
You like this?
hopefully we'll make this a quarterly thing. That's
Great.
my intent.
That's awesome.
So I think if you don't, are you turning it over?
It's your time, the
I
time is
should
yours.
taste it. So I mean, first of all, hopefully for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sheldon Stewart, previously Sheldon Stewart of Riverton City Council, but now represent half of your city, is what I'm gonna call it. The better half, because Steve's in it. I'm just kidding. That's right. I'm just kidding. I think you're barely in it, right? Because it has that weird jog right up by your house. So, but Kim Coleman, who was trying to make it here, but I think she's stuck in her neighborhood in South Jordan, is my policy advisor. But our goal is to just make sure that we have good open dialogue, good communication. That's one of the things I ran on. And making sure that we can push things that need to be pushed. Fighting for the Southwest, that's been always my theme, and I'll continue to fight for the Southwest. So that's where a couple things, I have been very lively in my questioning of individuals. And, that's where I was making a comment about with UPD, that yesterday they did some presentations, and I think everybody knows where I stand as it relates to Unified Police Department and the shared services. Those are a big concern. It was one of the main things that I ran on. And so we're pushing for that, and that's where HB 374 came in. Myself and Dave Albert worked very closely with Jordan Tusher, as well as I know each of your cities did. Because we feel like that if we can bring more of that control of the sheriff back into the county, it'll be easier for us to really dig into these shared service lines and what they like to call countywide services. And so I think that's where if we can, help with Chief Carr and as well as, I can't remember, what's the new chief in Riverton? Barfus, yes. So I went there last night for his thing, but, that we can really get that information. Because I think what it is, they're also trying to convolute a lot of the information between what's shared services, what's countywide services, and trying to relabel a lot of things that they label those things. So I was able to dig in.
Straighten that out.
Make it help.
I bet you pretty good.
Well, well, that's the thing is I think it's very difficult because what they'll do is they'll argue that it's countywide, and we have some communities and they've gone on record where they talk about, hey, we have the cheapest police services and that's why we like UPD. Well, the reason why it's cheap for them is because of the costs that are being paid through the shared services. So this will at least rein that in, it'll bring it in if that bill passes, but we do need a big push from elected officials to make sure it pushes through the Senate. on HB 374, and then to make sure that we keep that accountability. So that's an area where we're gonna spend a lot of time and focus. And so Kim, basically her job is to be up on the Hill the entire time that they're in session, working through these bills and looking at them. And then the update with the funding, so that did happen. You guys should, I don't know how that goes, where if you guys have to go push and get the check, or if the check comes to you, but that should save you on your corridor preservation. And let me see here, anyhow, I'll leave it at that, and I'll go round table and see if there's things that I can start working on for you all. Looking into it, I don't wanna take a whole lot of time, but this is what I want to give you that opportunity. So if there's areas that I can drill in on, that's where myself and Kim are gonna focus. So, you're actually our first official meeting, by the way. It's showing the love to Harold.
So, let me start with saying, I think that the items that you are passionate about, the things that were platformed for your campaign, are clearly aligned with what our concerns and focus is. I would say that everything that I've seen and heard is exactly what we would want you to be doing. You're advocating for a fair share of those monies and services to be allocated to the fastest growing corner of the county. I think you're checking into how the budgets are being used. I think there's just a lack of scrutiny that's been applied to those budgetary things, so I appreciate you doing that. I would ask a question, a specific question is, in talking with your director of, sorry, Kim walks in, I'm like,
She's the celebrity, I'm
you're the face.
yeah, I'm the face.
This is the best council, can I just say? Well, I guess I shouldn't say, but you guys are awesome.
You're one of the best.
In talking with your arts director, Matt, yeah, he had talked about the county is looking to develop a facility in the southwest. That would be
The next
for
round is that.
performing arts, all those kind of things. I don't know if you're aware, but Herman City's done and completed a feasibility study for such a facility in the city of Herman. And we have, we included aspects of that feasibility study, elements that Matt suggested regarding maker spaces, visual art space, all, you know, so on and so forth, rehearsal areas, that kind of stuff, to really make it the kind of facility that we think this region needs. I don't know how to ask this any other way than to be direct, is what do we need to do? What do we need to bring to the table to encourage funding of something like that?
So, I mean, right now, I think we're early in the stage, because I think what Matt's referring to is this next round of ZAP. So, at least that's my understanding, is if it gets voted on and it passes, which it has passed, the last two times it's been presented, then we'll, you know, that's something where I think that we need to do that. But I think if you have the feasibility study, you have the other things. One thing that has been talked a lot about is to make sure that these are inter-city arrangements as well, meaning that multiple cities are on them, kind of like with the trails and parks. I think you guys are jointly on that agreement where they're working on the Welby-Jacob Canal and trying to get that. And so I think those funds may have passed or are coming through for TRCC. I think they're taking the same approach with ZAP, that if there's a joint agreement between multiple communities, that you can do that. And I would say that I think Riverton's probably open to having that conversation with you as well. Because I think what
We
they're.
definitely took the approach of a regional
Yeah.
facility, right?
Yeah, and well, even if you were to say Riverton's in the competition for it, I don't think Riverton's in the competition for it. Riverton's really focused on the Sandra Lloyd Community Center and getting funds to enhance that and improve it, but definitely for a new regional facility build. So just make sure that you have those communities that are coming in saying, hey, yeah, this is something that we're in agreement with, we're in support with, really helps you as you come along. If you have multiple communities arguing for it, and so. And I think through the Southwest Mayor's Coalition, that's an ample opportunity to make sure that single voice comes forward. So, but definitely, I mean, I think it'd be wonderful for you guys to have that.
It's very needed. That's one thing the feasibility study clearly spelled out was the dearth of facilities out here and amenities to support that, and it would, yeah, man, it would be great. So
Sounds
appreciate it. Thanks, Sheldon.
yeah. So anything else?
I was just thinking, I just said, I think always first and foremost is transportation, infrastructure funding, those types of things, because there's never a lack of growth, there's always a lack of funding. So anything you can always do with that. But I was just thinking about the county, and I was thinking, every time I look at my tax bill, my property tax bill, and well, the county sure gets a big chunk, and every time I turn around, more and more land is annexed out of the county and into cities. And so then I wonder, what do you do with all the money? And we just had a sidebar a little bit about, you said about 500,000 to limousine people up the canyon.
It's a limousine service or a shuttle service that's going up. I voted against.
Yeah.
Dave Albert voted against. Everybody else voted for.
I guess when people,
And Amy Winder Newton wasn't present.
and I guess when people think, oh, well, it's we might only spend 250,000 of that, it's like, that's real money. You know, every dime that's getting spent at the county is being extracted out of a taxpayer. And so it just troubles me when I watch shared services and I see things wasted, in my opinion. $500,000 for the basketballs. I mean, that kind of stuff just seems like it's not a proper role of government. It just feels like the county needs to get back to just doing essential services, what the county is supposed to be doing, instead of entertaining the world, because they're using extracted taxpayer money to do it.
Well, and along that same category, the library, I don't know if you guys are aware, but they passed an increase in the library because what I deemed was mismanagement of funds, is what I would say it is. That they knew that this bond was coming, but they just come and they ask for more money to pay for these bonds to build these libraries. And when we look at utilization, I mean, for those of you that did, paid attention to where my open houses were, I had a lot of open houses and libraries, and what I did is I watched a constant stream, no offense to the people that work with the homeless, but homeless people coming in. I didn't see a lot of patrons coming into these buildings. I mean, the digital is very big, right? We need to do that. And so how do we push that back and roll that back? And as I sat there and watched people testify, multiple people testify, I watched library employees coming in, testifying, saying, oh yeah, we need this library, we need this library, we need this and this and this. And then they go out in the hall and I see high fives with the library director. And I already know one of the people didn't disclose they were a library employee, but I know they're a library employee because they serve on the UFA board with me. So those are the things that are concerning, is that we do have that mismanagement. We need to hold people accountable, and when they aren't accountable, and so the other opportunities, we need to look at opportunities of, do we look at a system that allows you as cities to act like Murray and Salt Lake, and then have a centralized system that connects those library systems, and then allows you to manage those costs.
Yeah, because seriously, if on my property tax, I pay more to the library than my own city gets. Harriman City gets less of my property tax money than the library gets, and it's like, and when they send out all the things about give us your feedback, Dave Alvar did a lot of, outreach to see what people thought, and I was glad to share what I thought about that, but yeah, it's just unfortunate to me that those kind of things just continue to be, and when we have roads that you can't drive on hardly, just essential service kind of stuff just gets, necessary infrastructure kind of gets lagged behind, and it seems wrong.
Well, and I don't know, you guys have been following the Fifth on a Fifth. There's 3 different bills for the Fifth on a Fifth. And I very much express my lack of support for anything that contains UTA in it. Just because we all know, and I think, all of you guys are aware, the 10-year plan right now with UTA has nothing coming to the Southwest. But what we have seen over the last 5 years is that our total taxes related to UTA have increased while services diminished. We're down to the point where we receive only VIA in our region. And yet Harriman and Riverton have preserved corridor for light rail or BRT that's owned and preserved and been waiting. And we even had that study that we jointly went in on, was it 2011?
Yeah.
It expired in 2021 because it's 10 years. And nothing happened, and then all of a sudden the Point of Mountain, and the argument that comes from Carlton constantly is ridership. You know, you need to have ridership, you don't have enough ridership, but the problem is in this, the phrase I've used with Carlton multiple times is we can't bale hay in a Walmart parking lot. Just the farmer boy and he's coming out
Right.
with that. So if you're gonna tell me you want ridership to go up, you've gotta give me a system that people can ride. And you're not giving me a system. And so we've had this problem, and then all of a sudden the Point of the Mountain now gets prioritized with the BRT line over our area, and what prisoners rode transit? I mean, you had a high
We didn't have any
population.
ridership there, yeah.
And so how did you get your ridership to do that? And that's the arguments that I hate hearing and that bother me, is when you can't make a valid argument against what you're saying and you keep telling me that it's ridership and the ridership goes somewhere else when the ridership doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's continued subsidy, right? We're always subsidizing and there's never any.
Well, and our average densities in South Jordan, Riverton, and Harriman are roughly 6 units to the acre. That's our average densities. And we're actually probably the most dense population, and Harriman even has a greater percentage of that density. So when you start arguing that that's a TOD, well, we've got 3 TODs between Riverton, Harriman, and South Jordan, large TODs that justify having some system. So anyhow.
I appreciate that, and then, I think that, I don't know how much has been discussed about the regional park with,
I was just gonna ask.
but, yeah.
Yeah.
We really, really need the regional park. We need funding for that, we need partnership for that. We just need a good vision for that.
So we've been talking, are you aware of that, what we're?
Well, I know that there was the discussion of expanding what is currently called Wordle Park. Is that the one you're talking
No,
about?
so this is a different one. This is over here about 6400 west. We have
Okay,
about
sorry,
40,
I'm not-
we have about
That's good.
40 acres preserved for open space. And we were talking to Rio Tinto prior to the annexation into South Jordan about expanding that into, and we're working with Martin Jensen to do basically an athletic complex. We probably need 80 acres. We would like to see 80 acres. And Martin's already committed to to make that happen in the ZAP funding as well.
In the next,
In the next round,
It will be included as part of the next master plan, which sets us up for that.
sets us up with the ZAP money. So we would just, and again, so we've started a conversation with Rio Tinto on that to, have that go to the county so that the county could then build that facility. Kind of like the RAC, if you know the Regional Athletic Complex in Salt Lake, where it's just overflowing. We did a feasibility study with the county.
so this is like soccer season has a certain level of things that can do it.
Yeah, it showed we could do
Soccer, lacrosse.
anything on a rectangular field. And we don't want the extra, frilly stuff, we just want fields. Which is what we need out here in the
Yeah.
worst way, so anything you can do to help push that as well.
There's parking and a couple bathrooms.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a good job of keeping a good relationship with the mayor's office, but I had a hard time. You can ask Kim. Yeah, it doesn't help that she thought I said that she was a launderer of money. No, I wasn't saying that. I just don't want the appearance of laundering.
Yeah, so it's right in, basically it's right in here.
Okay. All right. So I know where that is.
It just makes sense to have something like that, especially with the bees.
Yeah, in South Jordan.
All that kind of stuff, if we can just look forward to a big regional facility, the county can help facilitate, that's a big deal. And like you said, we have the 40 acres to put toward that, we're hoping that Rio Tinto will jump up.
And you said that it seems like Martin's amicable to.
Oh, very, yeah, he's on board too, yeah.
Okay.
The county went in on the feasibility study with us, we joint funded the feasibility study. Martin's all, cause they
Yeah,
know
Martin never brought it out. I've had a couple meetings with Martin, so he didn't ever bring it up with me, so.
it's a big deal out here for us.
Kim and I will make sure that we get that on the discussion with him.
Shelley, can I just piggyback real quick on something Sherry said? It made me consider that In
And by the
addition
way,
to
I'm
the-
not texting, I'm actually typing notes because my handwriting's awful, I can't even read it myself.
Got it, no worries. Outside of shared services or counties-wide services, blah, 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 it seems to me that because of the fact that the amount of land that the county is managing is shrinking substantially, how much analysis is being done about redundancy, where a city provides a service and the county's providing a service at the same time? And if most of the counties incorporated and already able to provide services, why should we be doing them at cities and counties? The same thing with shared services. Why do we have a SWAT team and we're paying for one countywide?
Cause I think shared service is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right,
Yeah,
it seems to me that that would be the exact word. There's duplication of efforts, of fees. It almost feels like double taxation across the board for a lot of these things. And that's a really concerning thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's-
I don't wanna,
I agree.
I don't wanna
No,
go
no,
nuts
so
on that,
I
but yeah, holy
think,
cow.
I mean, I would say, Steve, you're right on the right track. You don't mind me calling you Steve in this type.
I've been called worse
No,
by
no,
these
I'm
guys,
just saying,
so.
I can call you Councilmember Sheldon.
Yeah, exactly.
But, so, I mean, here's the thing is, I would say shared services is the easy one because a lot of headway has been made on it and there is momentum to at least have that discussion. Other than, I would say that, why wasn't there more of a push to have Harriman or Riverton also involved in this committee? And I don't agree with who was put in charge of the committee because that person has a direct conflict of interest. Because of, we all know this, we were sitting in the same room dealing with the same things. I won't go into the details on it, but we all know that that person was the central person behind it. And they just said, well, that person's an attorney, and I said, well, then let's have Troy Walker run it. I mean, if you want an attorney, let's have somebody from another. But I think this is the first area to start proving this out, that, hey, that is there. And some of the things that I got the sheriff to admit yesterday in the meeting really opened some eyes to people that if we don't address this, then you've got this direct conflict, which demonstrated the conflict. Number one, the DEA money, the county pays for that entire DEA task force from the UPD side. The officers are paid in there, and yet that money did not come back to the county. It sits inside of UPD, and it stays with UPD, and that board of directors of UPD decides what happens with that money. And it doesn't, we don't have any say.
Forfeiture money, just to.
Yeah, it is, it's the 2.4 million, but if we're paying for that task force, why aren't we getting, that portion of money coming back and the county council decides what happens with those funds? So that number one, got that admit. I got Sheriff Rivera, it took a little bit, but I got her to admit that, hey, yeah, that's who makes those decisions. She says, well, we have an accounting for everything. So having those conversations and then also showing the disparity in this report that was presented to me by the sheriff, showing 991 incidences of gang-related activities that were taken care of in Mill Creek and less than 50 on this report from a countywide task force in the southwest. And then Salt Lake City only having 135. I would be uproared if Mill Creek, a city of 55,000, which is just about 5,000 more than Harriman, right?
Less. Yeah.
Well, yeah, even less. I mean, I'm going based
About
off
the
of the
same.
less, yeah,
Pretty
but
close.
still, you're equal, yet you see 999%. You can't tell me that you can't argue that that's not a UPD-centric service. And then what they'll do is they'll argue that there's more gang activity that's happening there, which they probably have a higher percentage, but it's not 999% more. It's definitely not, and I'm looking at your chief because I know that we've got a lot more out here because we're seeing it. Because just on Monday night, I saw an individual doing some actions and come to find out, this individual was up in Salt Lake City doing the same thing and luckily I captured their plate number. So we have the stuff happening there, we're just not getting the attention that it needs because we're not seeing that. And so the argument is, and I do have some of the council members that have been in agreement that, okay, well, if you're gonna continue to fund, we need to proportionally fund the other portions of the county for these services. So that I think is the low hanging fruit, and then as we move further into the other categories, we do see this like disproportionate share when we come to even the arts types of stuff, right? You look at the facilities, they're all located in Salt Lake City. If we look at physical facilities, there's a map that clearly dictates that everything is basically east of I-15 and north of 6200 South. It doesn't sit in this region, but yet this is the highest growing. We actually probably have more capita, and in a report that was done by Mayor Staggs as it relates to UTA, if you take our three combined communities of Bluffdale, I'm including Bluffdale in this one, Harriman and Riverton, we're about the equivalent of what you see with Salt Lake City in total population, but yet we see the disparity in funding in all areas. And the arguments are that. The other category that we've been hitting hard on is this canyon fee. So this is a UFA fee as well, and this is where Jared Henderson can talk to you a bit about it as well. But we also see this with UPD, but yet you all are responding up. Harriman is taking the bulk of the responses going up Butterfield, and now we have that new area for cycling, mountain biking and everything, and Butterfield Canyon's gonna have more access in it. And so we've got to see these canyon fees funding these areas as well. And really what we need to do is we need to look at the contracting of those services. And we need to say which community is the best community to contract those services, and the county should be paying Harriman to patrol Butterfield. It shouldn't be the sheriff's office, because the sheriff doesn't have, you get out west here, the sheriff really doesn't have a good regional hub until you hit Kearns.
Yeah.
And even then, you could argue that's not a good regional hub because it's a population of 30,000. And so the same thing, and I explained this to White City, when I was talking to White City on another issue, they're using Midvale to cover that, and they went and bought a house in there, and they call it a landing station, but those officers are still in Midvale. So do what UFA has done and contract with Sandy City and take care of that region inside of there. So those are the arguments that we're having in the conversations, and so if we can just get over this and find a solution through shared services. So at the end of the legislative session, my hope is 374 passes. We see that they start building a committee and pushing to make sure that we have members that come from Harriman and Riverton dealing with a committee that talks about shared services that is not driven by UPD, but driven by the county. And then from the county, we institute that, and I'm happy to be the one to chair that committee. I'm the one that would argue for it, and we can have a balance of people. We really need to address this shared services. And it can't be driven by UPD, because that's what's happening right now with the current committee. It's driven by UPD, and then you're getting people that are being hushed or told to hush because they're gonna get things taken away from them by the county if they don't kind of take a different
Well,
position.
it's just protecting their turf, it's not doing a critical analysis, it's not fair.
Well, no, what it is to say we have this committee and it didn't, but I do think we have some decent players. At least me and Dave Alvord are very adamant about this shared service piece. So, sorry, I kind of went on a tangent on that one, but that one that's probably the reason why we're gonna focus there. Is it, cause that one has already gotten this process started. If we can show that there's something there, then it's hard for people to make an argument against what's happening. But you will see that the council took a position of oppose on 374 with me and Dave Alvord against and Amy Winder Newton. All three of us went against. We at least said, let's maintain neutrality on this bill. You know, we shouldn't be in a strong oppose, and we even got Sheriff Rivera to say that I support it, but there was kind of this weird wink at the end. Jim Bradley, if you guys have ever dealt with Jim Bradley came in and he said, well, if this bill were to fail, would you be sad? And she goes, well, no, I wouldn't be sad, but I think Sheriff Rivera is also seeing that it would probably be better for her to just have this come back into the sheriff, and then you come under the scrutiny of the county council, and it's easier to, we don't have that additional layer that we have to deal with. So, but there are some arguments that they're saying that UPD could remain intact with the current structure, and I don't think that's possible. I think you have to rewrite the interlocal, and those communities can get together, but the county will have to be out of that interlocal agreement.
No, I think you have a big elephant to eat, and you can only eat it one bite at a time, so I'm grateful that you're willing to start.
But the regional park thing, I was not aware of that, so
We can get you some information.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
can, yeah, that would be great, cause I definitely want to hear about that, so. Anything else?
Anything else? Okay.
How about your chief, is there anything I can help fight for you, chief? Sorry, I have a pretty good relationship with your chief.
I was just gonna add to that, when we talk about the shared services, the reality is we pay twice for it, and it's very easy for us to document that. We're paying for our portion of, is it $14 million-ish in that shared service area?
Well, it's 4.3 million is the shared service, but then we got the countywide level
Right.
as well. So, but it's 4.3 million of the 20%, so it's literally 20% of the total UPD budget just gets assigned to the county labeled shared services.
And the easy example of that is Metro Gangs. Anna Miono, one of our officers, is part of the Metro Gang Unit. When I send her up there, we have to pay for that. Paying for it twice.
Paying for the gang unit, and then we're also paying.
Plus her salary.
And then I have to pay for my officer to go up and be part of it. And we were offered to be part of DEA. Great, but we have to pay for it again. And I just wasn't willing to do that.
Well, and the other thing too is a lot of these guys, it's their secondary assignment.
Right.
Like, what they tried to do, and it was funny the way that they spun it, is they said, well, we have 3 FTE dedicated to this. But then later Sheriff Rivera goes, well, you know, we have people that have these, but it's all their secondary assignment. They're most of them, it's a secondary assignment. At least that's my understanding, is that they have a car, they do the Metro Gang Unit, they get to pay overtime, they say that they get these grants, all these things, so.
For us, it's a secondary assignment. One of my officers' secondary assignments. I do know that a lot of them, that's their full-time job.
It's their full-time
Yeah.
job.
I don't know the numbers, but I know that several of them, I know their supervision is a full-time job.
Yeah,
The
and I
lieutenant
do know
over
that.
it, the sergeants in it are all full-time
Yeah.
jobs.
So, I mean, but there is that disproportionate thing when you look at this report, you can pull it, hopefully you can see it on the meeting, but if not, I mean, we can get the slides, I'm sure we can get a copy of the slides. You'll see that how much of that goes into UPD space and how it's not balanced.
But it's a hard thing to unravel. Yeah, it's a very hard, difficult thing, as we tried when we left UPD to unravel that. You'll remember Sherry was here, and Steve, and it was very hard to pull that apart. And we didn't actually, at the end of the day, weren't able to pull it apart, so.
You know,
Doesn't help when they spend down fund balance, right?
we've had that,
Yeah.
we've had that similar conversation, in trying to go through our situation with UFA, right?
Right.
Just the UFSA exit and the taxing entity and stuff. Just going through that process, it's almost impossible to figure out what we're getting for what we're paying, right? How are you aligning, cost benefits, right? The way that these funds are counted for, it's not transparent.
Well, yeah, when you get into those service areas, and that's part of the issue that we ran into, because Jared Henderson and I were at the forefront of that UFSA separation, and I mean, we ended up having to negotiate quite a bit. Because there was an argument, and you can find in state statute where you have to take the portion of the bond payments, which is, luckily we got away from it, because they've got another bond payment that came in right after ours. So the timing was perfect, because then now you're just gonna bond for whatever you build, right? And that's probably the best thing. Riverton, we should have never gotten into UFSA in the first place, because we owned both of our stations, and the station that got built on our eastern border wasn't built for our community. I mean, it sits right on the eastern edge of Riverton. And so that station was built in a poor spot. So there's no growth in that area. It literally was built to cover Draper's service, and then Draper exited probably about 3 years after that station was completed. So it becomes difficult when you see that, but I will say this, fire is one of those unique things where regional service, it sees no boundary. Whereas policing, you do see that more regional boundary as that are confined to cities, because you have ordinances, right? You pass an ordinance that says you can't park on the street during a snowstorm. That your officers are gonna go out and enforce that, but you're not gonna pass an ordinance that says you're only gonna respond unless the fire reaches the second story, right? You're never gonna do that, or, hey, we're gonna only show up when the heart attack patient is 2 minutes into the heart attack, right? Those aren't the things that you're gonna see with, so fire becomes a little different when it comes to that model, but when we talk about policing, I think what's been developed here in the Southwest is probably the best way that I've ever seen one of these models. We have, I would argue we have the best SWAT team in the Southwest. By far,
We have the best SWAT in the state.
Oh, and in the state, and I would argue in the region, and we only lost to
Las
the
Vegas
host
Metro.
city.
Yeah.
So I would say I was very proud of our SWAT team. I'm
Did
very
well.
proud of the Mill
Do
Creek
better.
incident that we responded to twice.
Right. This year we'll win. And to that end, really, it's important to understand that we still have local control for your city, but we do, experience a little bit of an economy when we operate with partner cities. We
My
can still
favorite
have our
thing-
control, but we are on a bigger stage when it comes to
My
operating
favorite
with the
thing
other
is
cities.
to see a Harriman truck come into my neighborhood and respond on the call. And it really is my favorite thing. Cause before UPD, it was so hard to really tell what was going on, but it's just, it's amazing to see that. I'm very proud as I see a Harriman or a South Jordan car crossing the boundaries, doing the jobs that we have, and seeing what happens as it happens, just because it's because of what we've done and what we've created. So
Great partnership.
yeah.
Sheldon,
So,
we appreciate it, Kim,
okay.
thank you for
Yep.
all you're doing
Thanks for
for us,
getting out of your
appreciate it.
neighborhood, yeah.
Kim is amazing. Like, I will say that I couldn't have landed with a better policy advisor.
Great.
So I've got one of the most amazing, and Dave's got a great one too with Corinne. Well, matter of fact, they're the duo to be reckoned with is the argument.
I don't want them mad at me.
But thank you. We plan to try and make this happen every quarter.
That's good.
We'll just keep you updated, regroup. That's my commitment, and Kim's gonna keep me on track with that, but we're gonna hit every one of the cities that we represent. Draper won't get as much love. We might go once a year, cause I still do represent that western portion.
Is your bill up, is that in the morning at 8?
The 374, yeah, 374 is it tomorrow?
8 o'clock, yep. 8
Yeah,
o'clock
yeah,
tomorrow
Jared's
morning.
8 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it is we definitely need that to come out of committee. So, and it's not necessarily my bill, it's everybody's bill, but Jordan Tusher did a good job with what he did, and even the reconciliation on the bill. I'm glad it went the direction of the UPD thing instead of just removing the sheriff,
Me too.
so, yeah,
That's awesome.
so, anyhow,
We
okay,
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
thank you, I'll
Thanks,
exit
yeah,
myself,
you're
just
awesome.
excuse myself.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for proactively reaching out to us. This is a big deal. Thank you.
Well, it was my commitment that I made, and I'll keep my commitments, so,
Good job.
Fantastic.
thanks again.
Good to see
Good
you.
job, Sheldon.
Good to see you, Teddy.
Thanks, you guys.
Good, you're still wearing holidays?
Dude, I broke it out for the weather's here.
I wanted to see you in the white beard.
I can tell you how many days till Christmas.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, move on to item 2.2, review and discussion of proposed amended and restated MDA known as Midas Creek Plaza. Michael's online?
Good.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. And Clint is also online, and I know that Blake's been working on this as well. We're just gonna go through this presentation quickly and see what kind of questions and discussion the council wants to have tonight. John, I'm not okay, let's see if I can advance this. So our vicinity map, just showing the location. Of course, this is just kind of on the north edge of the Auto Mall area we've been working with developing. Next slide. We've dropped in the concept site plan into the vicinity map. You can see it obviously on the east side of Harriman Main Street. Next slide. As the council is familiar with, this property currently has a master development agreement, Game Pointe master development agreement, approved in 2019. And we've been hearing from our development partner, the Osmonds, that the market, of course, has changed, and trying to do a large indoor recreational or entertainment venue is just very difficult. And they're looking to make changes to the MDA, as we've been discussing in some previous work meetings, focusing on restaurant users, multi-use, just commercial, retail, office buildings, commercial services, and then office buildings specifically. A 2-story office building is what we've talked about. The proposal is consistent with our general plan. Of course, we identified that this would be a commercial location in the city, and the zoning is C2. So the previous plan included, of course, the MDA document, had a site plan, and also elevations or drawings of the proposed building. It was originally a very large recreational facility and a corner pad, probably a restaurant site is what we were anticipating. The new document, we do have a concept site plan But as the development group or our partner is saying, they're not really wedded to that site plan. It was just a quick illustration of the scale of development that they were anticipating. And the intention is to refine that if there is interest and further support from the city council. This group also has done development in Utah County, and so they've shared with us some precedent images of buildings that they have constructed. This is a 1 and 2 story structure, and then with some type of an outdoor space on the site as some type of a gathering space or maybe outdoor restaurant. Next slide. The MDA really is quite simple. The initial proposal from the development partner is to essentially follow the C2 zoning ordinance, have some specific land uses that were agreed to in the draft MDA, and then also just showing those precedent images and that concept site plan for reference. But as staff was looking at the plans and knowing, hearing from the council that we wanted to have this really be more of a placemaking opportunity, something that still has a gathering place or some kind of entertainment kind of quality. We felt like, the staff felt like relying just on the C2 zoning standards was insufficient. And so we began talking with the Osmonds and also internally about what could we do to potentially recommend some pluses to the project, essentially some specific improvements to the proposal. So again, there were no real formal design guidelines that were submitted by the development partner. In meeting with Aaron, it was my impression that it wasn't that there was not a desire to do that, but they have spent a bit of money already on their previous development plans, and they're not so anxious about spending more if there's not an assurance of this partnership moving forward with an amended MDA, which is what, of course, what they're requesting. So next slide. So these are kind of the main topics, the issues that we identified as we went through the planning commission. We will need to have a parking study. This group is actually very anxious about having users share parking, and they were concerned about that our parking requirement would make it difficult for them to fit in all of the uses that are on the site. We've assured them that our planning commission historically has been very willing to accept modified parking as long as there is an engineering study or a parking study that really supports that there can be a shared use. So you have a certain population that is using the site during the daytime and then a different population that's using it in the evening, like a restaurant group. Property does need to have a new subdivision done because the previous subdivision plat obviously was anticipating a very different development pattern. Again, the proposal is to follow this C2 standards. We're recommending that maybe we just kind of be more specific through the MDA amendment, and then also just following the landscape ordinance, the current landscape ordinance with the water-wise landscaping. Next slide. So as we started really focusing on design, Aaron and his group really liked the idea of trying to have the buildings, front or face or have some really pleasing architecture on the public streets. We on the staff recognize that is challenging, obviously, in a very suburban context. So we began really thinking about what are some ways maybe we could use maybe the corner element as a primary feature potentially into the site, both architecturally and also for like a plaza space. Maybe this could be one of the gathering spaces. But if not, having a strong landscaped or plaza corner really works well for a gathering space, maybe at least defining the corner with architecture. I know there's been some talk about possibly landing a kind of a larger restaurant group. That I think would be a great fit on the corner, having a really strong corner element. And as you can see, the site plan really doesn't lend itself well for a larger restaurant, But again, this is just a concept, so I wouldn't get too anxious about the site plan right now. It's also interesting, you know, the development partnership showed us a lot of precedent images for kind of that outdoor gathering space. But the current site plan really is only showing like one location where that can be. And we'll look at that just a little bit more. Next slide. Clint has been using a new GIS tool that helps us to model. And then even from this model, we have the ability to start predicting or showing economic benefits, potential job creation, also, you know, just a number of metrics associated with development. But this was a very early example of just trying to look at different ways that the site could potentially be massed on the project, just for reference. Next slide.
Are those all two stories, Mike?
Oh, please. So the we're anticipating that the single, there would only be a 2-story office building. Everything else would probably be like an overheight single story commercial building.
This tool is really,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Love the whole,
Yeah.
all the, I mean, it's cool to visualize it, but the things you talked about, feasibility and economic impact and employment opportunities and all that stuff, that is awesome data. Love getting
We'll
that
start
stuff.
seeing a lot
Yeah.
of those in our presentations.
Great.
Yeah. And again, these were just really, really quick. Clint, I owe him a more than a free lunch and a couple of culture coins, because he just threw this together so quickly to get this on the planning commission, because we knew that the council really wanted to see this tonight and start working on it more closely. All right, next slide. So again, this is that idea of let's make sure that whatever goes on the site, that we have good walkability between all of the different paths and users of the site, also connecting to all of the public street frontage. And then it was a recommendation that we move those dumpsters away from those street frontages, just trying to make sure that we have a really strong street presence on the site. Next slide. We were recommending that we be more specific with the materials that are used on the buildings. And also there was a recommendation that we have at least a minimum 30% glazing or windows on the ground floor. One of the key issues that came up through the Planning Commission and the staff review is that the draft MDA is specifically calling out restaurant users or restaurant uses as one of the required uses. But in the city code, fast food is a separate type of use. And yet we're seeing at least one drive-through on the concept site plan, or at least the ability to have drive-throughs. And under the draft MDA, you can't have a fast food drive-through. And so that's one of the questions is, does the council want to allow for essentially a fast food service within this project? And the Osmonds have said that they would like to have at least 2 buildings that have this type of a circular drive approach, so that they can have more than one building that has a fast food service. The other thing that makes the fast food service a little bit difficult is it's probably in between the pads that we're going to see those gathering spaces, those outdoor spaces. So if you take 2 buildings and have those drive-throughs, you're just limiting where you're going to have those outdoor spaces, those gathering spaces. But it's a trade-off. I just know that from the development perspective, they really do want to have 2 buildings that have these drive-through services.
Do our soda shops and like smoothies and that kind of, are those considered fast food, quick service style in the ordinance? Okay.
So if you look at the definition of a restaurant, so general restaurant, which is the type of use that was specified in the draft MDA, it says an establishment open to the public where food is prepared and consumed on the premises and where food and beverage orders are taken at the customer's table from an individually provided menu and are served in non-disposable containers by an employee at the same table. So I don't see Quench It or.
But I don't even see Cafe Rio or Costa Vida or Subway or Quiznos or Jimmy John's, any of those would not fit in that category.
They're all fast food.
Yeah, well, right. And why that's not been a problem in other locations is that we do allow fast food restaurant as a permitted use in the C2 zone. It's just that we haven't allowed that on this particular site because of the MDA restrictions.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Again, this is just that if we pull those dumpsters away from the edges, we think that there's an opportunity to have some stronger landscape buffering around the site, trying to screen the parking lots from view. Again, Aaron really liked the idea of trying to have building architecture really define the project. So this was just a recommendation that the Planning Commission had looked at. Next slide. This was just a list, kind of the bullet list of all of the issues that the Planning Commission had forwarded to the City Council for consideration. I won't go through all those in detail. But the Commission did make a recommendation for approval of the MDA amendment. Also renaming it changing it from Game Pointe to Midas Creek Plaza. And then the next two slides, I think, are just reference images for conversation. Clint went and looked at a number of projects throughout kind of the region, looking for examples of these concepts of either having a strong building architecture on the corner or also just these plazas and these gathering spaces, which seem to be something that the council has expressed a lot of interest in. So that's the project. It's now, ready for, your fingerprints and helping us decide, tell us what you want us to do with the draft MDA.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thoughts from council?
So the only thing that's required is 35% needs to be a general restaurant or indoor entertainment. Anything else is kind of open to whatever, right?
Currently, the way that's written, yes. So the plan is, I think, as they wrote this, and we were trying to get an outline of what the design guidelines should include, and then bring them to the council and let you guide what those will look like as an entire council. And then they'll put those design guidelines in the attachment that's in the back of it's got a placeholder in the back of the agreement. And then these uses, we heard from the council that you do want to have a percentage, I think it was 35% as restaurant. And then as we started looking at that and working with the Osmonds, that's where Michael brought up the issue with the drive-through, because the Osmonds really do desire a drive-through. They're a couple of their tenants that they've been talking to, with the changes with COVID and everything, they said, we have to have a drive-through with our sit-down restaurant.
Even La Fonte has one, right?
Yeah,
And
we're
it's a
starting to see
takeout,
it.
but it's like,
And some of the restaurant groups we're meeting with and talking with, they bring that up, and it's an interesting change. We started seeing it in the middle of 2020, and so that's a code change that it's not in the code, so that'd be something we need to add into that agreement too. That would have to be specifically allowed, because currently it's prohibited in the code for a restaurant to have a drive-through. A sit-down restaurant, full service, to have drive-through.
But there's nothing that prohibits them from putting a Burger King and a McDonald's if you allow the drive-through.
So they could put it in, but they'd have to preserve that 35% for the sit-down restaurant.
If that's what you're saying, unless you change the definition of restaurant.
Or you could change you could tackle it two ways in this NDA. You could tackle it as allowing a
drive-through or
drive-through
quick
in the
service.
restaurant as it's defined, or you could change the definition of restaurant. So, yeah, you could do it.
I think the way the way the planning commission probably looked at it was keeping those still separate, not allowing fast food to count as a restaurant.
Yeah, I would hope so. But then I worry a little bit about what quality of restaurant you're really gonna get.
Well, it's,
Drive-through? It is an interesting discussion, I think you're seeing that more. The groups they've been talking to, I don't know they're big on the drive-through. They may also want to have some of the fast
soda shop.
casual.
well, like, let me give you an example. One of the ones they talked about was Blocks, BLOX. My wife and I went down to, it's American Fork.
They sell the bars, right? Like the-
Yeah, it's like, it's great. We went down there, went in, and it has a drive-through right by it, but it's not really like a fast food place. It's like a dessert thing that just happens to have a drive-through window. So, I think that would be a great amenity. I think that's a great kind of shop to have. But again, if you call it fast food, is it gonna be what we're hoping it's gonna be? I don't necessarily we wanna be aspirational with this. I think we want to be more directional, you know, intentional about what we're trying to do.
Well, even yesterday, I had breakfast yesterday at Village Baker. To me, that's really nice. I would love Village Baker. I mean,
Yeah,
I think it'd be
but
great
they got
if they
drive-through.
have a drive-through.
Yeah, so like, St. Neaters does, yeah.
Yeah, but they're not really, like, I love David Neters too, but I wouldn't consider that, hey, you wanna go on a date to Neters? Do you know what I mean? I'm just saying that depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for more fast food and
I kind of feel personally attacked.
I know, I was like, that's where our last name was.
It's real.
No, I'm not saying that, I'm just wondering, are we looking for a more upscale restaurant, or are you just looking for a
I think
restaurant?
that's where you say, okay, 35% is restaurant, and then you have the other two sites, one or two sites, if
You
depending
could
on
have a
size.
drive-through for,
That have drive-through, yeah.
for
One
another
thing
kind
we
of.
discussed, working with Michael and Clint, we were trying to enhance the site more with this outdoor seating concept, because none of that is required in the C2 zone.
No, but that's
It's
cool.
required in an MDA. Maybe if you know, the give and takes of everything in an MDA negotiation. If you give on allowing a drive-through in a restaurant, maybe you get back, you have to have so many square feet
Of outdoors.
outdoor seating.
Right.
Create that place or something.
And I don't get the, sense, I guess is where I don't get the sense that they are trying to squeeze in a Jack in the Box in there, you know what I mean? That's not really the kind of tenant they're looking for in their
Well,
project.
plus those corporate, they have their corporate model, you're not gonna get a Burger King or a Wendy's or,
Right.
they got their own packages.
Right,
Might
that's
have
why,
a
but if you allow
coffee
an
shop or
MDA,
something,
there's,
right.
there's potential that put things there, is all I'm saying, and they only have control for so long, and then what happens next? You know what I mean, it just feels like in MDA, it has to
Krispy
be
Kreme
very,
lines are long.
I know,
Krispy Kreme would be
so are
golden out
Chick-fil-A's,
there.
they're a nightmare too.
now,
The owner has told me that they plan to retain ownership of the site and lease it, so that might keep out some of these franchises as well.
Which is good, but we know how fast that can change. We have a situation in our own city that we thought was gonna be forever too. Anyway, those are some of my concerns. There's not a lot in here. Obviously, design guidelines, you guys sent a lot of suggestions from the planning commission, so.
Those are good suggestions,
Yeah, I
by
like
the way.
your
I
suggestions.
really liked where you guys were going
So is
with
that
this.
where you'd like to go from here, is have the staff work with the Osmonds to draft up a draft of design guidelines and then bring them back to the council to.
what do you guys think, so, one thing they brought up, like, the landscape or architectural corner, right? That corner's pretty small in aspects, and if you had a big architectural corner, you're gonna lose space first the seating area, unless you use that as the designated seating area. Such like that. I almost love the other one where they've got the
Massing
massing of the corners of the building, and maybe it's a sheltered or semi-sheltered area for seating on the back side of that, or the inside of that, maybe it's a open canopy or something, I don't know.
Just be, and a lot, because there would be a lot of traffic and things on that road.
Yep, that corner's gonna be pretty,
It's not gonna be
I think we
very
can leave that
good,
open, say
so.
they can do either one, you know, I mean, whatever they can fill, cause I think either one of those corners is gonna look great, either the massing or they let them fit their site plan, I think either one's great.
Can I say it this way? I don't like negotiating with ourselves. I'd like to see what their ideas are, how they take some of these suggestions and kind of what they come up with conceptually, right? We know what they took the site and they said, here, we can fit 6 buildings and here's what it looks like and da-da-da. But I'd like to see them flesh that out a little bit more and maybe even draft an MDA that would kind of reflect that. And at least then we have a place to say, okay, we'd like to tweak this or change this or negotiate on this point, rather than trying to start from scratch and go, let's negotiate on 72 different things all the same time.
Is there anything that you just have to see, right? Cause I think they're open to having this conversation.
wanna
What we
spend
wanna know, is
thousands.
there anything that is like a must-have from the council? This, we want to see at least this, and we heard that about the percentage of restaurant entertainment, but is there anything on these design guidelines? And it's fine if it's not really, we'll do yours, but if there is, we'd just like to know that when we go to sit down. Here are the things that are kind of must be in here, and they'll have their must, and then we'll put them together.
I would say that we originally had the idea of having Game Pointe. And if we can't have Game Pointe, I think we were all articulating a desire to have some suitable replacement alternative type of things, right? Gaming, recreation, entertainment, restaurants, those kind of things that would essentially fill that need, but maybe in 10 different pieces instead of one big one. So how we articulate that in terms of what square foot or percentage or whatever needs to be X, Y, or Z, I don't think any of us are taking a super hard line on that per se.
I wanna see some placemaking. I
Yeah,
love the word that Michael uses, placemaking. We don't have
Yeah.
a lot of places in the city, like gathering places. I think somehow I wanna see that come out of this MDA, is like, whether that be in the outdoor seating or whether it be in the uniqueness of like the placemaking, this has to be something unique.
So we got 35% for restaurants. Do we have a percentage for gaming or entertainment?
That is,
said
either
that was
all
that
part of
or that, restaurants or gaming, it's one or the other.
I mean, again, this.
And percentage too, because part of it is an office building, and that's gonna be
But there's-
neither of those,
But
right?
there's no
So-
guarantee on office.
Well, see, I think that should be a guarantee. I think we should have some office building there.
Yeah, that
And I
was
think
what
they're
my
okay with
concern
that too.
was,
Yeah.
it's kind of loose, it's like,
But let's
the only
make sure
thing
that's
we
in
really
there.
require is 35% of the restaurant
Yeah.
for
And the
entertainment.
percentage could be, that's why the percentage doesn't initially make sense to me at this point yet, because if that's a 2-story building, it's a certain square foot. If it's a 3-story building, then it's different square footage and throws off all your percentages.
Percentages, yeah.
I think that let's say it's the, 4, kind of the 2 restaurants, the 2, 10,000 square foot places that could be
Yep.
deminimized into 4s or whatever, and then the office building. So if those 2 are either a large entertainment amenity, a big sit-down restaurant, something that would really leverage that open space in between, I think that's something we'd like. And then, if let's say there's 8 potential other spaces in those other buildings, is it unreasonable to say we'd like 3 or 4 of those to be related to
Some sort of entertainment.
to entertainment or restaurant, or a combination of the both,
I think
axe
whatever,
throwing and ice cream or something, I don't know.
whatever we do, it has to be something you can enforce, and that's where I think the percentage came from, cause you can look at that and say,
Right.
yes, you met this standard.
But we don't have a
But again,
building
we're doing it in
concept.
a
Yeah,
vacuum
it's
right
all
now.
conceptual,
Correct, right, so that's why the percentage made, okay, we want at least a third of this development to be that restaurant or entertainment. So that concept, I think, is still open as we talk about design, the placemaking. So this all has to come back to you, so that part of the concept was, instead of having the planning commission negotiate all this and then give it to you, is
Yeah.
got their recommendations, we want you to look at it, so maybe I think our next steps is to work with the Osmonds, come up with something, as Councilor Shields said. We can bring it back to you, they are interested in moving this quickly, so we'll try and get this
Yeah.
back in front of you as quickly as we can.
I'm not interested in scaling back on parking, if that was a request.
Yeah, it was-
We have,
Never has been a request yet.
they just said shared parking or something like that.
Well, I think they're dual use, cause they're saying your office can use 20 parking spots, and then your restaurants are this, but it's offset.
Cause again, that
hours.
maximizes what we're gonna
Right.
do as a city if they're
Yeah.
able to share.
Yeah.
If it makes sense for them.
Yes,
right?
correct.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jared.
As it says there.
Hi, Jared. Did you say something?
I
That was Michael.
Oh,
Hi, Michael.
sorry.
I would say that I would
I
love
would
to
just
see
agree.
Okay,
an
good.
outside seating area or a gazebo, some restaurant shared space of that.
I have that written down, of the things really, office, we want office, placemaking, outdoor seating, and then really let them come back with some concepts on.
I don't think their site concept right now is really that far off.
No.
I think it just needs to be enhanced by the design guidelines we've talked about, maybe fleshed out a little better. And I think we're probably close to,
And I love the,
we'll say yes or no, you know.
when I first saw those dumpsters, the trash receptacle circle, I'm like, it's perfect sense for site plan, easy construction, right? But
Right.
flow and access of people and pedestrians and that's, I'm like, that makes more sense, hiding those or getting those in the
Well,
center.
and if you, I've been trying to navigate back to the site plan itself. I mean, this is kind of obviously the Osmond's first effort of trying to figure out how they fit all these pieces in. But you can see if you take another one of these buildings and you loop a drive-through lane through it, you really start to limit, okay, where are you gonna start having those gathering places? Where are you gonna have that outdoor dining seating? I mean, it's just like, it just doesn't quite
Just
all.
in between that one, just in between that one
Yeah.
10,000 pad.
That's where I think we do need to limit it to one.
Yeah.
I just
That's
feel
what I
that.
Yeah.
I think so
Anyway,
too.
so,
But I think an alternative could be, if you're gonna take advantage of that corner with some cool design elements or architecture or even a L-shaped building or something, kind of take advantage of that corner, really make it a presence. It's gonna be a pretty good attractant.
On Miller and Main.
For
Yeah.
the more upscale kind of hope we have here, that I think would, I think the mayor said, well, it's a place that people wanna go, it's a gathering place, it's a destination. And I think that's more our desire than drive-through.
Well, the only other thing I can see this for secondary is on that two-story office building, if they have a potential drive-through there, coffee shop or something, but then it's over on the outside. They're both in the same area. But that's probably the only site area.
Moving that two-story office to a different spot.
No, well, no, just doing a loop around there, just adjusting the.
Same would be.
Even like a
Almost like a
mixed
vertical
use
mixed
on
use.
this, yeah.
Yeah.
The only bad thing about that is people coming and going constantly in an office building, you can't drive through around it. Is
Yeah.
that a safety concern?
It's not the greatest.
If they come out the front, it shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, and it depends on the building type and
Yeah.
structure and stuff, yeah.
So I feel like we have some, did you guys need anything else, or do you feel like we have at least enough to start this conversation with the Osmonds?
I think we're good. I think they're just looking for some assurances to move forward with their site design a little bit more too. They were kind of holding, saying, well, or is the council okay with this and this? And it sounds like one drive-through is okay. Gives them some assurances, so we'll chat with them and see if we can move forward. Another thing to keep in mind is along Main Street, we have the future transit corridor preserved, so massing up on the corners can be difficult.
Were you not here for the first meeting?
No, we did preserve it, so we do have it. So the buildings will have to be set back, quite a ways from that area.
Is that representational right now, or no?
I don't know. I'll look
Okay.
at it.
It looks like it is farther back because of where the sidewalk is.
Sidewalk is proud of, they're pretty far.
Yeah, it puts those buildings back about 40 feet.
Yeah,
from
your
the
sidewalk is
sidewalk.
showing right there, and then the property line is right there. So I think it's accepted, they're showing that, but
It's probably pretty close.
I'll just say this, cause I can't speak for all of us, I can only say this for myself, but, I think we've liked where they were going with this.
Yeah.
This has been, I think we've been generally accepting of it and liked where they're going, and I know that it's hard to spend more money without some assurances, right? They're already have a bunch of sunk costs with Game Pointe. But I think there's a point where we just have to kind of trust each other to move forward. We've given them pretty good feedback and a lot of details, and I think we've been pretty consistent with those details all along. We haven't really come up
Maybe
with
just
something
treading
new or
lightly,
different
yeah.
or, veered off course. And just carry it through, let's go.
So one of the things they have asked for some flexibility, because they've been talking to one user who would probably combine one of these buildings size-wise in one user. So if that comes, so as we draft this, we'll be there, but if they were to use that kind of user, large restaurant kind of group, this would change a little bit. So
Absolutely.
but the concepts of what you're
15,000
talking about, the
square foot
outdoor, yeah.
Are they both seven?
I don't
Yeah.
know that the site plan is, it has to
Oh.
be locked down quite as much as just the
Really?
details.
I don't know, Steve, what,
I have an idea.
So I'm not opposed to, if we've got the design elements, if we got the base site plan, if you're squishing the building together or modifying it slightly, I don't have an issue with
Yeah,
that.
I just wanna make sure, cause that's,
Yeah.
we're gonna draft it so they have some of that flexibility, but with these concepts, so if that's good, I think we got our.
And really, this will come back to planning, the site plan would come back to planning commission for approval, so this will be the rules and guidelines that'll be reviewed in site plan.
I like it.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to item.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
We had 30 inches of snow today.
Michael did?
No.
Oh my word.
We had,
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been crazy.
Hunker down. Come back next week.
Maybe.
Don't park your car on the street.
Okay,
A
move on to
nice long driveway.
2.3 cemetery rules and regulations. Anthony.
All right, thank you, Mayor Council. So this has been a long time coming. I've been trying to get this to you guys for the last, almost year now, so I'm glad to be here with
been
you.
dying with,
Yeah, glad to be able to bring it to you now. So basically, I'm assuming you all know where the cemetery is, down on 6,000 West and Harriman Boulevard. Essentially, we are running out of space down there. We're just about out of plots to sell over here in the old section of the cemetery. As you can see, what's marked in green is what we have left to sell for plots down here. So when I did my count, I think there was 30 or 36 left, but I know it's even less than that now. So it looks to me like there's maybe 20 or so, 25 left. And none of them we don't have any side-by-side plots left, so we're quickly running out of room there. What you see in the rust color there, that's everything that's been sold previously. It doesn't necessarily mean that all these plots here have been filled or people are buried there, but they have been sold, they've been purchased. So we're at the point where we feel like we need to expand the cemetery over here into this western section. Now, with that expansion, we've got a few questions and need to, I guess, work through a few items with you and understand or get your thoughts on how you want to proceed with that. So the first question, I guess, is we do have a plan for a road to go through that section, that expansion section. It's been, our GIS department has plotted this out and kind of preserved this corridor for a road system to go through there. However, we don't have to do that if we don't want to. By not putting the road in, you would be able to squeeze in probably right around 500, maybe a few more than that, additional plots in that area. Obviously, it allows better access to these back corners. However, from this point on the road out here to the fence, you're only about 200 feet from here out to this corner, which is probably the furthest anybody would ever have to walk. You're approximately 280 feet. So you have some options there.
I like the road. Think about if you had to have a funeral today and you have to wade through 2 feet of snow to get back into that corner. It is nice to have accessibility besides having to walk across the whole thing.
So, one thing to consider there, on days like this, when there's excessive snow, we typically go out and we'll clear a pathway for the families to get there. So, but I understand your point and totally
I just
agree.
was at my mother-in-law's funeral and it was like winter, yucky, and you had to walk a zillion miles. It was not fun.
And I think I agree. Do we have to do it now? Can we start from this way, move out, and then?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's
It's a
something you
lot
have
of
to do
money
now.
right
Like I said,
now.
we've got it marked out.
You need
It's
to
something we could do in the
actually put it
future.
in.
Yeah.
Just so you're aware, this is the
Preserve the
cost,
corridor.
an estimated cost of the road. Bryce was gracious enough to put this together for us, so you're, in today's dollars, you're roughly $383,000 to put that road in. So future dollars, obviously maybe
and that's
more,
full
maybe less,
asphalt.
we don't know. That would just be an asphalt, basic asphalt road, no curb and gutter, just probably a concrete border, similar to what we have over in the old section.
Do you think that we should put a road there?
I personally don't think it's necessary, but like you said, if you, I do think you have a lot of elderly people that are in the cemetery, so
And you
for
wanna
them,
go
it's probably
visit?
Really
nice.
Some.
You could do it, as an alternate, you could do a pathway, right, a smaller pedestrian pathway.
You can do walkways.
Wouldn't be as expensive
That's what I was
to
wondering.
move you back. Again, any cemetery, once you get onto the grass, you're gonna have to walk through the grass, right? There's no way to have a path to every.
No, yeah, for sure.
And I did do a comparison with other municipal cemeteries and other private cemeteries. Municipal cemeteries seem to be a little bit smaller areas. And so the distance that you would have to walk here in our cemetery was on the, I guess, the farther end of that. But if you look at some of these private cemeteries that are a lot bigger, it's not uncommon to have to walk 400 or 500 feet to get from a road or an access point out to the furthest headstones or grave sites.
What about parking during services? If you had a big funeral or big site service, do we have enough
Park on the
access for
roadways.
parking right now?
So typically, it hasn't been an issue. Usually they'll park up and down the roads. We have the parking lot adjacent or right next door at the park. And then there's also parking out on the road south of there, Heritage Hill. I think it's
What if you
Heritage Hill or
just did
Freedom
the
Hill Drive.
outside one and not the one through the middle?
You could do that as well. It's an option. I'm trying to remember the exact number of plots they told me. I feel like it was, I want to say 180 plots fit in this section right here. So you would add.
And not to mean to jump from subject to subject, but you're gonna double stack these, right?
So that's another point we'd like to
So
talk
that's,
about. Yes.
that's another good thing, is in the front, you can't double stack, but back here, even though you have one plot, you get two bodies in it, so that's.
We'd like to provide that option.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the next points we were gonna discuss, so.
So one would be at 10 feet, one would 6.
You dig down to 8 feet on the first one, the next one would be roughly 5 feet.
Oh, the vault's right on top.
Right.
It's pretty common in most cemeteries.
Yeah,
Yeah,
most
Unless
cemeteries,
unless
they're
you have a
better use of
groundwater
space.
issue,
Yeah,
you will do that. It's unusual to actually restrict.
yeah, rather than mandatory versus.
So let's come back to the road. Let's go through the rest of
Sorry.
it. 'Cause I think. So double stacking, yes, we're okay on double stacking then?
I don't know, you have to make a decision on the road tonight. I think we're looking
Yeah.
for the rules, really.
So, yeah, any other thoughts on the road system? Okay.
I think if there's any way we can save money with a better design that might include pedestrian paths instead of roads, you know, wide cement walking path or something seems a lot less than
6
to build a big road, you know?
Following
we-
the same configuration.
Well, I wonder if we can still get our equipment or like for access, say it's a 6-foot cement or asphalt road instead of what's the distance there? What are they proposing?
This is
12?
no, it's wider than 12. I believe it's 16 feet wide.
So I could even see it shrinking like half where it's
Yeah.
only
Like
access,
single lane,
single,
one way, kinda.
one way sort of thing maybe, or it's just equipment access, or,
Yeah, I just think, like, I watched my aunt go to her husband's grave,
Yep.
you know, she couldn't walk that far,
no, but she could drive one directional through it,
Drive
yeah.
around and then jump out and walk on too.
That's where if you do an 8 foot, people are gonna park. That's my concern if you do 8 foot, because people do tend to park on the
Yeah, they
side
do.
and then
They,
you can't
they
get
will,
out.
yeah.
But then you can't
And we
get
have
out
that
of
issue
the-
down here on down on these other
It's
roads
cheaper to park
that aren't quite as
Most
wide.
cemeteries are like that though, it's not like, wow, we have great passing capacity.
walk
I don't know.
across.
But I think the idea is just to be able to access graves if you wanted to, you know what I mean, I don't know, if it's too.
But I mean, this isn't that big. I mean, I know it looks crazy, but
Like I said, the furthest distance would be 280
Yeah.
feet.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not like it's.
Sorry, we're belaboring this and we
So,
probably don't need to.
Again, we don't have to come to that conclusion right now. I guess we can, for the time being, we can keep these.
I don't think we need the
areas-
middle one regardless. Does
I
anybody
don't
think we need the middle one?
And we should note, there are actually
What's
already
Perhaps that's a walkway.
walkways that are designed
Just
through there, probably their
continues that.
Irrigation.
irrigation lines. So really, we can come back to this, we don't have to decide it tonight, it's just something, I think the other policies.
Yeah, I don't think the middle needs to be that.
I'll jump ahead and say yes on double stacking. Yes, raise the fees.
Okay.
And yes,
that's
flat
easy enough.
headstones.
And yes, flathead sounds yeah.
One point I just wanted to bring up with the double stacking, the first burial of that, I would suggest that we increase the cost of the cover up or the grave dig by 40%. Essentially, that's it's 40% more to dig out. So that would be my recommendation there.
I'd say that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and in talking with Riverton is doing double stacking, American Fork, they do double stacking, that's essentially what they're doing as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Looking at fees, now, in order to get a more apples to apples comparison, we're on these columns right here, we're looking at, regular hours during the week, so these vary across the board from cemetery to cemetery, whether you're doing it after 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whether it's a weekend hour, but these, all these are during the day, during a weekday right here. So this is kind of where we lie with our fees. You can see we're definitely on the low end with our plot purchase price and with the, for resident and non-resident. And then as well for the cover-up fees. Again, we're on the low end there, resident and non-resident. So I did have, I ran some numbers just to see where we would be at. Say you increased it 25%. So 25, if you increase the plot fee, the purchase price of the plot 25%, that puts it at $937.50. If you increased it 35%, that puts you at $1,012.50. So even increasing it 35%, you're still on the low end there. On the purchase, or on the plot purchase price.
I think we need to bring it up to.
So anyway, I would just
Chairman's
ask
a
this
snazzy
question,
place to be buried now.
why do we need to increase it? I mean, is there costs associated with this that we're not
Sure.
covering our costs? Are we losing money on the cemetery? I mean,
Definitely.
I don't wanna make money on the cemetery.
Well, the labor costs, the
No, I just-
equipment costs, all of those, obviously, you guys know everything's gone up in the last
Sure.
couple of years, right? So I would say, number one, to recoup some of those costs. Number two, being on the low end here, we're inviting non-residents and a lot of people from throughout the valley to our cemetery, which essentially is filling it up quickly.
But you can cure that by raising the non-resident,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And that's my only
And
question.
those are all options, you guys.
And I'm not suggesting that we don't raise it or not, I'm just saying that if we're talking, well, let's raise it 35%, I always wanna know why should we raise it 30%? Are we going in the hole on that, is it, you know what I mean? So
So
that's my
one-
question.
One thing that, it doesn't sound like we're doing it with the cemetery, and a lot of cemeteries, when you pay that fee, a portion of that money goes into a fund. It's essentially a perpetual maintenance fund that the city can draw off of for whatever. We haven't done that, that's what I was just asking.
Oh,
if we
like
do that. I don't know
grass,
if
just
others-
for general maintenance kind of
Well,
stuff?
it's, so what you put in then that interest off of that fund helps offset the ongoing cost. Cause really your residents are paying, and there may be people who are no longer here, have no family here, but there's just a way when somebody's acquiring the right to be buried, cause I think that's what they're doing, they're not actually buying a plot, they're buying the right to be buried at some point. Their, a portion of that income, or all of it, depending on how your cemetery's set up, goes to a perpetual, maintenance fund. And so you just hold that, so if you were to increase it, what you're saying is, we're gonna put this money aside, and over time, we use that, whether it's to replace, irrigation needs to be fixed in a certain area, you can draw some of the interest off to do that. Normally, that's not used to like mow it, unless it's a really big cemetery generating a lot, but it's just one thing. Otherwise, the money goes into the general fund and you're using it, which is fine, but it's normally a portion of that, which is why you see the plots so expensive, is they're buying the right, but then they're also helping fund perpetual maintenance of that.
You look at South Jordan,
Just a sidebar I asked.
South Jordan, you can see that their fees
Yeah, I
are,
just wanna know what it is breaking even, what the fee has to be there to break even,
Sure.
you know?
I don't
It
have those
depends on
numbers for you, I'm
if
sorry.
you take the idea that you're gonna set up a perpetual, like this is likely what they're doing here,
Exactly.
I'm assuming.
Yep, they have a built-in maintenance fund.
Nice.
In South Jordan,
South Jordan, they aren't doing that.
are they view lots? Is that, well, I know there's like certain areas of the cemetery that are more,
I do know when they did the cemetery expansion, they did a very lengthy feasibility analysis on the cost. They don't have a separate perpetual care fund set up. But ultimately, once you don't have any plots to sell, it is very expensive to upkeep the cemetery.
And having run very, very old cities in the past where we had cemeteries that have been around since the 1870s, that perpetual fund helped maintain the entire site again.
Once it's full, then you don't, you
Should
know.
just
Once it's
building
full,
up a
you're
trust
not
fund to
generating.
take care
So
of it.
again, those rates were quite a bit higher, but you would show, here's your right, you're buying the right to be buried here, it's this amount. The rest of this is, and you put it in there because you know you're gonna need it at some point. Hopefully the interest, it's invested in a way that it's generating and it's growing over time, it's a maintenance fund.
It's hard to calculate that number really, because the other number, the open and closed number, you can calculate pretty easy, right?
Cause it's time and
But the
labor.
other-
Time and labor.
Yeah, but the other one is kinda hard.
Yeah, this is a finite resource, right? You only have so many
Yeah.
plots, they have to be able to maintain themselves. So that could be something,
We could run that
Look
metrics
at-
out though.
I'm trying to think of
Well,
like.
I just
Honestly, I
wanted-
don't think
I
there's
just
enough
wanted
slots
to
to
put
create
it
enough money to.
The revenue outpace the inflation, yeah.
I don't think it ever, it's
Alls
gonna
it ever
eventually
does-
eat itself up.
Alls it ever does is cover some of the gap, right? Cover some of the
Yeah,
costs.
I think
Even
that's
with
gonna be our
with
best
any
hope,
maintenance
right?
fund, I've never had one that actually paid for the entire cemetery. But it generated enough so when the council was saying, okay, we're gonna have to go spend $100,000 on a new irrigation system, and we can take 25,000 that's been built up from here, so
That makes
the current residents aren't paying the full amount. And again, as you get to build out on the cemetery, it's just helpful to say, yes, it pays for a portion of it, so. I would recommend if we're gonna do this, that we look at that. We may wanna look at some other cities too that have done, it's been a long time since I had to do that analysis, like more than a decade, but
I can't say working at a city that had a perpetual care fund, this was also a time when interest rates were 0.5% if we were lucky. That was offsetting a small portion of the actual maintenance cost, but they were using that perpetual care fund to help fund some of the major capital costs that were coming up, like repaving roads, doing other improvements to the cemetery, so ultimately, yeah.
it's just a concept that obviously we haven't done, but we could look at, and again, when you're paying to have a family member buried, you see, okay, I'm paying this for that, but this extra part is going to maintain it.
And you know it's gonna be
Going
maintained,
forward.
yeah.
Because any of these headstones, I don't know how often we have to reset them, but often,
We're lifting them more often, especially.
Really, alright.
well, especially the ones that are standing up, and any of them, they settle, when things settle, you have to go through and fix them, and that's what that perpetual was to do, just to offset some of those costs that you would have that were,
That makes
they weren't major costs all the time, but they were something there.
Some of those things are like 3 inches down from the.
It's hard to mow, huh? But in the new part, you're only doing flat ones, right?
Now
No
that's what I'm
raised.
proposing, and that's what we would like to do, is just flat, no uprights.
Yeah, it's just for
There you go.
maintenance, it's so much easier, right?
Yep.
Especially if we're doing double deep, we have to get a bigger piece of equipment in there,
Yeah.
and it would just be a nightmare to try and get a backhoe in there with uprights,
I
so.
agree, so.
As long as you're all on board with that, I would definitely push forward with that.
Yeah, I agree, I do, you guys agree with that?
A mausoleum.
One other thing on this slide is the monument location fee. We don't charge anything right now to have a monument company come out and set a headstone. We have to send our GIS guys out there to mark the plot, mark where the headstone goes. It's pretty common in other cemeteries to charge a fee there. Is that something you guys are?
Yeah, I
Just
think
the base fee to set a pin, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's,
and I would echo Sherry's comment, this isn't it's not a profit it's not a business.
Just
We're not
trying to cover costs.
We're just
Yeah.
trying to cover the costs,
Yeah.
and I think that whatever that is, the fee should reflect what the actual
I
costs
agree.
are. And whatever that needs to be, if that's 30%, if that's 50%, if that's 100% increase, if that's what it takes to make sure that it's at a break even, let's make sure
Yeah.
we do that.
for our residents, and then the non-resident is like.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
gouge
we
them
look
all.
at that and,
No.
no, I just think that we look at that and say, are we trying to encourage more people to come here, or are we trying to preserve it for our residents? And if you want to come here, you have to pay a premium to come, you know what I mean?
It could be grandpa though, that's what's tough, right? I'm a resident and grandpa want him close, so I'm burying him here. And I don't know what that ordinance looks like, how that reads.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Having had
He would be a non-resident,
several people
I
this
think.
last year ago, just expensive.
So,
These prices are like,
they
ooh, that's a good
could,
price.
like, if
Yeah, I was thinking the same
second
thing, like,
resident could purchase a plot and give it to an immediate
Oh, I could-
family member.
I see.
Oh, so that's.
So there's a workaround there. Okay.
You do have that.
Anyway, I don't know.
Well, any other thoughts on this? Is there a certain percentage you would like to see this increased, a certain dollar amount on any of these line items?
If,
or-
I mean, if Kyle, what
Especially it's
Kyle's
based
saying,
on
it sounds like somebody's already done the hard work. South Jordan kind of did the work and came to this, I think we're low. I mean, I don't think we're covering our costs, so I think we at least need to come up to the bottom one. I think we at least need to come up to West Jordan.
Well, does it, do we have, can we do a cost analyst in a couple weeks or months, or what we looking at?
What I would recommend then, it's gonna take time. We just are short-staffed with people who can do that kind of
Yeah.
work. And I know Councilor Shields asked for that last time, which we met today to talk about how we get there. We just don't have enough bodies at the moment. Again, cause I would like to really encourage us to look at a perpetual maintenance fund. I think that would be, especially as this is the last section of the cemetery, we need to be trying to have something that will help offset some of these costs in the future.
So I guess that's where my proposal for today is, can we go to the West Jordan, which is the bottom right now?
West Jordan or even Riverton though.
Or
I mean,
Riverton?
Yeah,
Can we go to Riverton?
I wanna be.
Almost
opposed to
Riverton
that.
across the board would be almost, I like that actually, cause they've got the monument fee.
That might come down a little bit, but I mean,
And then we can come back to you, so we
yeah,
would
and
do
see
this
if,
at the
and we could
interim
lower
and
it
then come
or
back.
increase it from there.
yeah,
I like that.
and maybe $200 of that goes towards the perpetual fund.
Yeah, we would wanna
Or a
look at
percentage, yeah.
how you do that, Frank. In my other places, it was probably 50-50.
Oh, okay.
So if you, 600 would have gone to the perpetual or
Maybe we just go to $1,000 on the resident plot instead of 1,200, and then we can stay at 3,000 on the non-resident. Cause what did you say, 35% was only
35% is not
$1,000, right?
$1,000, yeah, 1,012.
35% was 1,012.
Yeah, so I mean, that's increasing to 35% if we just go to $1,000 instead of 1,200.
Yeah, but if you've never bought one before, you don't know it's been increased.
It's true, but have you ever have to do a funeral if this is
It's-
one
it's
tiny
expensive.
drop in the bucket of what you have to
You ever
do?
tried to get,
It's $20,000 plus easy. It's buying a used
what's
car.
a plot at a private mortuary place? I mean, it's gonna be way more than this.
Yeah, 3,000 to 5,000 probably.
That's what I'm thinking.
You can buy them in the basin a lot cheaper.
Did you say the basement?
The basin.
Oh,
So
the base-
going
Where
forward, do you wanna
Where do we
go,
wanna go? We need to move into, we need a quick. So Sherry's proposing 1,000, anybody opposed to that, anybody?
I'm not opposed to that, but it might hold up our perpetual fund.
So what I would propose, you're gonna set something, we need to do some analysis. As we have time, it's gonna take a little while, but you could set it today and.
Okay, set them out, we gotta go.
I'd say do Riverton, accept the $1,000 for now, and then do the analysis and we'll change it in the future.
Okay, I'm good with that.
perfect.
Yeah, cause that's reasonable, $50 on the other.
Is that what
I
you're
don't
looking
care
at
if
for the
it's
open
double
close
on
too?
the non-resident.
Kind of
What's that?
the 75, so you went up $50.
Yeah, okay.
Those both went up $50, the non-resident doubled, but the resident only went.
Yeah.
We gotta figure out what we should spend.
So, and then as far as the ordinance goes, there's just some minor changes we'd like to make, just adding earn to the verbiage there, alongside Kaffner, Coffin in various locations. At Juneteenth as an observed holiday, we'd like to, not allow confetti in the cemetery, that seems to make a
They
big
have
mess all the
under
time.
that.
Yeah, and it gets everywhere,
Yeah.
so.
It's biodegradable.
We would need to change our visitation hours and the hours of the cemetery to coincide with the rest of the park ordinance updates that we'll be bringing back shortly. And then in there, it says that monument companies need to contact the Parks Department before setting a headstone. They don't necessarily need to contact the Parks Department as long as they're working with the recorder or assistant city recorder. And so we can just change that. So those were the minor changes to the ordinances, if you guys are all good with those.
Yeah, I like it, I'm glad you're double stacking.
Can I just add something really quickly? This is a difficult business emotionally, to
Yep.
be in, and so our staff, reporters office,
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
dealing with the difficult situations.
So it's always sad.
Okay, thank you.
So, Anthony,
Thank you for the
Thank you.
chip.
presentation.
We'll be fast, so we'll be back to talk about e-collars quickly.
Well, we're gonna talk about it tonight.
Yeah, so just after agenda, but we only have one.
The pledge is gonna be the longest part.
It's gonna be pretty quick. We'll probably be back here in 20 minutes, so that's my goal.
It's on your update.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Turns on updates.
It's not a goal or a promise. Where's Jared?
Oh, yeah,
Let's have
sorry.
another meeting remote.
Motion to
Oh, yes.
adjourn our work meeting.
Yes.
Second,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. My gosh, I'm so.
come on,
Jeez, slacker.
who's running this meeting?
Who's running this show?
John,